Thank you very much. First of all, congratulations to Simonstown School, the Lawhill Maritime Center. 25 years, my goodness me, this is a major achievement. And I can't tell you how excited I am to be with you today on this grand occasion. Now, it's an open secret that this is my favorite school. I know as a professor, I'm supposed to be objective and fair and all of that. And indeed, I've been around the 9 provinces and seen some amazing schools. But this is a truly exceptional school in the country. Good is good, and I always respond positively to any invitation by Debbie Owen and colleagues because of what you have accomplished. So I really hope that once this pandemic is behind us, and it will be one day, that we'll be able to meet in person and celebrate again and again this amazing accomplishment of an amazing school. Now, what I do want to do today is to share with you very briefly 7 things that I find exemplary in the context of the center, of the school and the center. And it's 7 things that, if we took it seriously, would have fundamental, far-reaching consequences for the rest of the school system, which is quite moribund, as you know, in South Africa. So what attracts me to the Lawhill Maritime Center? What is it about your school that makes you stand out amongst many? And I want to begin, number 1, with the innovation in the school. Now, South Africa is not known for innovation. We're known for reproduction. We do things over and over and over again and try to get different results. You know that definition for madness. We are good at reproduction. We are not good at innovation. We are good at imitation. We are not good at innovation. And so what you do at your school is to develop, for the first time in our country, a curriculum that is based on 3 accredited maritime subjects: maritime economics, nautical sciences, and the marine sciences. And nobody does this. And the fact that you could get away with it, so to speak, the fact that you could get the attention of the Department of Basic Education says a lot about the leadership of the school. You are trying to do something different. You're not just doing math, science, languages, economics, and the works. You're introducing maritime subjects. And the innovation is what is missing in our country, which is missing in our curriculum. You know, I often wonder to myself, why will South Africa not discover a vaccine for COVID-19? You know why? Because we're so caught up in dealing with the present that we don't think about what the future might look like. When we have a crisis like the Clicks hair story, we go back into the past, which is fine, but we don't find a way of connecting back into the future. We are so caught up in our own misery, we are unable to think ourselves out of a problem. There is no reason why we cannot develop a vaccine. It's not primarily a question of resources. It is primarily a question of imagination, or the lack of imagination. And that is why your school stands out, because it does something courageous. It works with something, again, it goes against the grain of curriculum common sense. And it says, how can we innovate? How can we do something differently? And that is why I admire this school, and that is why you stand strong after 25 years. The second thing that always enthuses me about whenever I come to Maritime Center is the enthusiasm of the people that work there. Whenever I come there, I grew up in Steenberg and Retreat. My parents were evangelical Christians, not of the swinging from the chandelier types. They were a bit more, they a bit more English, if you know what I mean. But they, but I love going to the charismatic churches, because when you walk through the door, they want to lay hands on you. They are happy, they're joyful, they're spirited, and all of that. When I come into your school, I have that sense of joy, that sense of just incredible excitement about what you're doing. And let me tell you, you can run the most innovative school in the world, but if there is no spirit, what they say in Afrikaans, skool gees, if there is no spirit, then of course your school is dead. And I want to say again to the leaders and the teachers of your school, thank you very much for the way in which you make learning come alive in that school. You know, I was there one afternoon, I remember, and the students were all standing, and they each had some kind of a map in front of them. I take it it's one of those seafaring maps or whatever the term is. And you know, I thought to myself, for a bunch of young people in the heat in the afternoon to get excited about a map, you got to be nuts, man. But you know, there was something about the way in which they were taught. There was something about the spirit in that room that said to me, man, this is a bunch of charismatic you know, individuals who enjoy what learning has to offer, and all of that. So thank you for the enthusiasm. Thank you for making people think about learning as fun. This is amazing. The third thing, besides innovation and enthusiasm, that draws me to your school is the sense of partnership, of vital partnerships, both in terms of funding, but also in terms of training opportunities. And the fact that the school connected so tightly to the private sector in general and the maritime industry in particular is a large part of your success. Now think of a typical public school, or for that matter, a private school in South Africa. You basically stand by, you know, you're on your own. You might have, you know, sporting and cultural events with nearby schools, but there isn't a strong sense of connection to the private sector and so on. And this is what you've been able to do. And even the connection that the school makes with me as a lowly professor out, you know, in the world of academia, I know you're not just doing that for the sake of getting a speaker. You're doing that because you know it is important for your school to be networked in the broader community, this, you know, in civil society, in higher education, and of course, in universities. And so when when Emily Orion and I put together, she herself is a young graduate, university graduate, and I invited her to put together this book. Immediately, there were stories dominated by two schools, Maritzburg College in Pietermaritzburg and Lawhill, and so on. So that sense of connectedness to a bigger world, the sense of partnership to the maritime industry in particular, is something that explains your vitality. The fourth and related thing that draws me to your school is the sense of what it means to do work-based learning. Now, in the universities of technology, as they now call, they used to be called technicons, this notion of work-integrated learning is central to their mission. And you know, very often they struggle to make those connections across the disciplines, but you do it with one discipline, and you do that in the context of the maritime industry. Man, I cannot tell you how important it is to give young people a sense of learning on the job, that you don't just sit in stuffy classrooms and get theory. You go out there, whether it's to Antarctica, or, you know, Cape Agulhas, all of these places, you go and you learn with experienced people about how to do the job. My profession is teaching. I can tell you now, most of what I learned about how to teach, I actually learned by teaching. I learned by, in my first year, watching, excuse me, watching very experienced teachers do their job of teaching, and so on. And so a huge shout out to your school for understanding intuitively that you cannot introduce people to the young people to the shipping industry unless you put them on ships, unless they learn to wake up early and work hard, unless they learn how to navigate their way through stormy seas, etc., etc. And this is fundamental to the distinctiveness of the Maritime Center, Lawhill, compared to almost any other school that I know of in the country. And that connection between work and learning, you must never lose, otherwise you just become like the rest of us. The fifth thing that really struck me about Maritime is the Lawhill, is the consciousness that you have, that you are in Africa, that you are in South Africa, and that you have a duty, as do all of us, to serve those on the underside of history. And when I come to your school and you tell me yet another student, about another student who's gone big in the industry, who comes from rural KwaZulu-Natal, for example, I can't tell you how it warms my heart that you understand what equity means in practice. And this is something that I think South Africa doesn't understand, is the enormous difference you make. Without fanfare, without a lot of bannering, without a lot of headlines, you just do the job of serving those who would otherwise never get out of a little village in the Eastern Cape, but now can get onto the high seas and see the world. My goodness me, what an incredible contribution to equity. Right up front in your mission statement, I find these words: our mission, our main mission, is poverty alleviation. We need you. We need you now more than ever. The COVID-19, I can tell you now, has exacerbated an already dire situation. It's made poverty worse. It has made educational outcomes more unequal. And the fact that your school stands in this beautiful part of the Cape, in Simonstown, with a mission to deal with equity, you are doing it. I am so sick and tired of listening to university leaders and private sector leaders and public sector leaders talking about equity. I admire you because you do equity in your daily work. And then number 6, something that really attracts me to Lawhill is the sense that you have of life skills not being a subject in the curriculum, but an experience that must be had. And so in addition to learning about rowing and swimming, I was amused that anybody that joined your program has to learn how to swim. It sort of makes sense. And you probably heard the joke that made its rounds in the early day of democracy, that the head of the Navy couldn't swim. I don't know if that's true, but it's a good joke. Listen, congratulations to you for understanding that life. I'm not a big fan of life orientation in the schools. No LO teacher speaks to me, no math lit teacher speaks to me, because I think those are dummy subjects, right? Not that the idea of doing math is bad, not that the idea of doing life LO is bad, but the way in which we do it. Life orientation for me, by the way, is showing up on time. Life orientation for me is staying after the children left. Life orientation for me is about being an example in your classroom. Life orientation for me means working harder than anybody else, okay? So that when your young people, your children, your students see you, they see an example of leadership. You don't just talk about leadership, you teach leadership. You don't just talk about working in teams as an important life skill, you demonstrate how to do that. And for that, the country owes you a huge vote of thanks for teaching our young people, not just math and science. Any idiot can learn math and science, okay? I often speak at these elite schools along the southern suburbs line, and I often tell these, private and quasi-private schools, I said, I'm almost sure your teachers are going to do a good job of teaching you math and science. I don't know whether they will teach you well when it comes to human relationships. I don't know, I told a boys' school the other day, whether they will teach you how to respect women. I don't know that, okay? I don't know whether they will teach you to respect Black people. I don't know whether they will teach you how to not look down on people. who earn less than your father. I don't know that stuff because I really don't think, by the way, a lot of our schools do a good job of that. And so you're getting kids graduate from high school and even university, and they got straight A's in everything except in human decency. And so I admire Lawhill because you are able to deal with these real life skills that you cannot simply get tested on in an examination. And finally, number 7, what really attracts me to your school is that you deal with the real issues that South Africa faces in terms of race relations. Now, let me just be blunt with you. I don't believe we are different races. I believe that's a joke, and there's no scientific basis for biological distinctions of race. It's just total rubbish, okay? We grew up with this indoctrination that there's African, colored, Indian, and white. It's rubbish, okay? Unfortunately, it is a social reality, even if it's not a biological reality. The fact that you live in Khayelitsha and not Claremont as a Black person is unfortunately a fact of how people were organized socially according to these racial nicknames, etc. There is a huge difference between Kirstenbosch and Khayelitsha. And so it's not an accident that the people who live in those places are predominantly from one or another group. So we have to face up to these issues. And so this is what I admire about Lawhill. I'm seated here, sitting here in my home in Stellenbosch, and I'm looking out on this crowd. And from what I can see from this angle anyway, is I see mainly middle-aged, maybe older, white South African men and women. Let me tell you something. Do not underestimate your presence at Lawhill. Do not underestimate what you model for the country. Do not underestimate what energies and resources you bring into the lives of young South Africans that makes a difference to the outcomes, the social outcomes in our country. You know, educational research, and particularly in educational economics, is largely equivocal on almost everything except this. And that is that the private and the social rates of return to education are the highest in South Africa, even higher than Brazil. In other words, if you invest in the education of the individual benefits, but also the society benefits. And by doing what you do in the quiet way that you do, you are also, you're not just changing lives, you're also modeling how we can be together as South Africans. Because every time a crisis happens, whether it's Clicks in Sandton or the Senekal police station this week in Senekal, we just split automatically, you know, down lines of white and black. And God knows we need Lawhill. We need the Simonstown School. We need you to demonstrate that there are other ways in which we can tackle our problems, that we're not all tribal in our instinctive responses to a crisis, that we can work together. And I admire you, I love you, I respect you, I talk well of you behind your backs, because you're the kinds of South Africans that make me really proud to continue to put in my 18-hour day with you to make sure that we not just make an impact, but that we make a difference. May this beautiful, beautiful school, this beautiful South African example, continue for another 25 years until we meet again. Thank you.